There is growing conjecture that China wants to control Afghanistan's mineral reserves, especially their copper possessions, in order to fill the power gap left by the US withdrawal from that nation in 2021. The copper mine project was reported to cost a whopping sum of $200 billion. As a matter of fact, these resources are very crucial in the worldwide energy revolution away from fossil fuels and toward renewable energy sources. In the long run, China's potential involvement in Afghanistan poses problems to the West in terms of security and governance, given its global role in the exploitation of essential minerals. But where does Afghanistan fit in China's grand project? Stay tuned until the end of the video to find out, and please press that like button while you are watching. It is reasonable for the United States and its allies to be concerned about China's prospective foray into Afghanistan's mining industry. China is prepared to take further diplomatic and economic actions in Afghanistan. Beijing is in a good place to negotiate mining agreements with the Taliban. Although it has refrained from attempting to reverse the sanctions, it has maintained its diplomatic mission in Kabul, implied that it would formally recognize the Taliban government and voiced opposition to them. The highest-ranking foreign official to visit the nation after the Taliban's takeover, aside from Pakistan and Qatar, was Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who paid a surprise visit in late March. He criticized the public pressure and financial sanctions placed by non-regional organizations on Afghanistan. Mining accords between China and Afghanistan are rational in theory. Chinese mining firms may be able to give the Taliban the money they require to lessen the impact of severe international sanctions that have caused an urgent economic and humanitarian crisis. Beijing would receive access to a fresh, abundant source of minerals necessary for the government's ongoing decarbonization initiatives. The US and Europe's move to renewable energy faces a strategic challenge as a result of Chinese supremacy throughout key mineral supply chains. Massive batteries for electric cars and clean energy storage technologies require the copper that can be obtained in Afghanistan. Afghanistan also possesses rare earth elements, including copper, nickel, and cobalt, which are all essential for the transition to a clean energy economy. In order to maintain its dominance over these and other minerals, China is increasing downstream investments. China already controls a sizable portion of global mineral processing capacity. Washington has recently taken steps to strengthen its energy resources. Interestingly, President Joe Biden used the Defense Production Act, a law from the Cold War, to increase American production of the minerals and metals required for clean energy storage technologies and electric automobiles. Chinese advances in Afghanistan raise issues with global fraud and governance. Afghanistan has had bad governance from the beginning, characterized by a lack of openness, a lax rule of law, and a high level of conflict. A pro-democracy, anti-corruption force, albeit having significant flaws, has disappeared from the picture in the wake of the American leave. It is impossible to foresee how China's entry, possibly as a partner in trillion-dollar corporate deals, will affect things. But in other nations, China has at best had a hazy impact on anti-corruption initiatives. Afghanistan has previously suffered from corruption. There is a higher risk that citizens will not profit from the economic development advantages of natural resource rents when states are not able to enforce credibility, accountability, inclusion, and other supplementary processes. In reality, American concern over China's possible involvement in the mining industry in Afghanistan might be baseless for the time being. It's unlikely that China will grow Afghanistan's mining industry on a wide scale in the near future. Along with significant operational and commercial constraints, there are also security and regulatory issues. Given that Beijing has other projects in the works that are simpler to execute and are located in less problematic regions, it seems doubtful that Beijing will make an intensive, high-risk copper move to Afghanistan. The Taliban own extensive, untapped, but potentially valuable natural resource reserves. The massive, but relatively untapped mineral resources of Afghanistan are worth between $1 and $3 trillion. The extremely high cost of tapping the reserves is not taken into account in that assessment, though. According to a 2019 map of the Afghan mining industry, the nation has reserves of important commodities for the energy transition. Additionally, it is thought that the nation contains huge copper reserves that could rival those of Bolivia, which presently holds the greatest reserves in the world. Afghanistan's recent severe economic collapse has raised concerns about how the nation may take advantage of its undeveloped natural resources. Currently, the nation is dealing with a fatal humanitarian catastrophe that has been made worse by hyperinflation, millions of dollars in lost revenue, and the breakdown of the financial sector after the Taliban took control. The International Monetary Fund foresaw a potential 30% decline in Afghanistan's GDP in 2021. There has been conjecture that selling the unexplored riches may give the Taliban a chance to establish trustworthiness with foreign players and assure a consistent flow of lawful cash given the rising demand for copper. Although the Taliban currently makes money from mining, monetizing copper will be challenging. Afghanistan already has amateur and small-scale mining, most of which is illegal and ungoverned and occurs outside of the nation's official economic and regulatory framework. Throughout the American war in Afghanistan, the Taliban, Daesh, paramilitary forces, and warlords all relied heavily on mining as a source of income. The Taliban developed revenue streams from a fairly diversified portfolio of minerals, including industrial minerals like talc and chromite, and bulk commodities like coal. They also used more conventionally lootable, value-per-weight mineral deposits that are simple to transport to markets, such as gold and gemstones, emeralds and rubies. The group's second-largest source of income after narcotics is reported to have been mining, which brought in between $200 million and $300 million. This money came from a combined effect of transportation charges, collecting quasi-royalties and security fees from miners, and direct mining revenue. But as things are, the Taliban need outside assistance to commercialize Afghanistan's mining industry, which includes copper. The majority of the minerals in the Taliban's mining portfolio can be extracted and/or processed with modest resources and technology. Artisanal and small-scale miners use relatively simple methods to extract gemstones and gold from exterior or near-surface sources, but processing and mining copper is capital and technology-intensive, necessitating foreign investment. It seems improbable that China will lead the production of Afghanistan's copper in the near future. Given the risk of prohibitions, Western investors are unlikely to participate in Afghanistan's copper business. China is the front-runner to operate because it has long sought strategic dominance in the green energy revolution's copper-dependent battery energy storage sector. Chinese organizations today control roughly half of the worldwide copper supply and 60% of rechargeable battery production capacity. Since the Taliban took control, China has maintained a complex but cordial relationship with them. In fact, China has been negotiating with the Taliban for many years off the record. The Taliban administration embraced the idea of Chinese aid and development in July, 1 month before Kabul was formally overthrown. According to reports, representatives of various Chinese corporations visited possible copper sites in Afghanistan in November 2021 and made on-site surveys. However, there are several reasons to be dubious about Chinese-led financing in Afghanistan's copper sector in the near future. State-owned China National Petroleum Corp is concurrently debating reorganizing the operation of the Amu Darya oil and gas project. The Taliban and Chinese investors are apparently still in contact and have other continuing discussions, including ones around the copper. It is challenging to separate fact from speculative due to the lack of information on which corporations may be considering investing in copper and where. No agreements have come about as of yet. This implies that although China is willing to make compromises, its main goal might be to deny rivals access to these assets. Considering the sequence of projects and prospects that'd be considerably easier and less hazardous to execute, as others have pointed out, it is difficult to see why China would make an assertive short-term play in Afghanistan's copper sector. With the exception of the DRC, Chinese corporations have sought out advanced projects in nations with a history of mineral extraction in all of these instances. To further its larger geopolitical goals, China is probably engaged in a long-term strategy. Beijing is aware, without a doubt, that corruption and insecurity provide huge short-term hurdles to any major mining growth in Afghanistan. An alternate interpretation of the issue is that China is embracing the possibility of investments such as those in copper mining as one of several negotiating tools with the Taliban to forge strong ties and promote its larger geopolitical objectives. Chinese bids on concessions might also be a calculated strategy to prevent other nations from making investments in Afghanistan's mining industry, cutting out concessions to other participants in order to preserve its market domination. Beijing has been very clear that it wants the Taliban's assistance in securing regional stability. Beijing is more likely to cultivate connections in order to hold on to the possibility of future large-scale development while standing in line to see how Afghanistan's governance and the industrial copper marketplaces pan out. If a tough regime is steady, China may be prepared to accept it. However, given the current situation, donors are less inclined to offer aid that goes beyond the most basic forms of humanitarian relief, which makes it difficult for the Taliban to handle the growing security and economic issues. If China's ambitions in Latin America fail to materialize, or if logistical obstacles disappear and Afghanistan's economic and humanitarian condition stabilizes, Beijing's short-term calculations may alter. But as of right now, it's extremely unclear whether China would make a concerted attempt to develop Afghanistan's copper reserves.